Greetings. Father Mark signing on, continuing the course on medieval church history with another unit on medieval Islam. Last time we concluded with the death of Muhammad on June 8th, 632, and the choice as for successor of Abu Bakr as the first caliph, rather than Muhammad's son-in-law, Ali. So we pick up there in 632. The importance of Muhammad's personal presence for this can be gauged by the immediate fracturing of tribal unity once news of his death spread. Within days, the tribes of Arabia split into four groups, three of which had individuals claiming to be the next prophet and, to continue hearing the word of God. Abu Bakr never claimed that. He just claimed to be the successor. But he had an advantage. And his advantage was one of the Sahaba named Khalid ibn al-Walid. He was one of the Sahaba, a noted warrior, who was something much more. He had the situational awareness, and that combination of tactical and strategic acumen, such that he proved to be one of the most successful generals of the century. For 18 months, 632 into 33, Khalid systematically engaged and crushed the rebellions, presenting the first caliph Abu Bakr with tribal unity in Arabia after his final victory on March 18th, 633. Abu Bakr then issued the order to Khalid to spread Islam outside of Arabia. This order changed history. Khalid planned a two-pronged assault that would simultaneously engage both the Byzantine and the Persian empires. So, let's see. Well, this map is too small to see everything, but it's enough to. So right at when Muhammad died, and then the movement was confined to Arabia, so he planned a two-pronged assault, basically following the caravan routes, because the caravan routes followed the oases, the water, where the water was. So one route would just go up the Red Sea and go into present-day Jordan, the Holy Land, Lebanon, Syria, and that would be engaging the Byzantines, the Greek, the Christians. The other side would go up the Persian Gulf, and then would engage Persia, or present-day Iran, over here. And Iran went over, let's see, well, I'll look for a map there. But anyway, you see that it's a two-pronged assault to engage both of the empires in the world that they knew of. The Western Army, the Red Sea side, consisted of 7,000 troops. The Eastern consisted of 18,000. Strategically, the plan was simple and unavoidable, as any operation was limited by the necessity of following the available water. In addition, the Arabs had a tactical advantage in the camel. As the camel, in that climate, because the camel can go for long periods without water, and the shape of the camel's foot is such that it handles traveling long distances over sand much better than a horse, it provided an advantage. So with an army mounted on camels, if the Arabs felt threatened or overmatched, they could simply go off into the desert, out of range of the horses. In 633, the Persians, 633. So we already saw in the eternal Greco-Persian War that the Persians had taken Iraq from the Byzantines. and the Emperor Heraclius had not yet taken it back. So the eastern Muslim army, the Persian Gulf side, achieved the first major successes, marching up the Euphrates River north, taking Hira in June of 633, and capturing Anbar by September of 633. Let's see. Okay, so when following the Persian Gulf side, so you see they go up here to Kuwait, and you see Iraq. So now we move to this map where it picks up here. So that's Kuwait, and so they go up here in Iraq, and these are the Tigris and Euphrates River. So they keep going north. Iraq and Iran is separated by the Zagros Mountains, so that's not as easy. And we'll see how they do that. They have to go through a couple of passes, but they're aiming here for Iraq, and then next would be Syria, the Holy Land, and all this disputed area of present-day Turkey. So quite the ambitious undertaking. Now, the local population in Iraq had changed overlords from the Byzantines to the Persians. And remember, it was Christian because it was part of the Roman Empire, so we converted them. And they did not at all care for the Persians because at the time the Persians were pagan. Now, there was no indication that the Byzantines would ever return. So the locals faced the choice of serving pagan fire worshippers or monotheists. At least the Muslims were monotheists. So for the most part, the locals accepted the Muslims. And with the local population compliant or at least indifferent, the Arab invaders only had to worry about Persian garrisons, against which they had the advantage of the camel to strike, to hit and run at will. In 634, the Emperor Heraclius, the Byzantine emperor, who was, remember, trying to conquer back everything the Persians had taken, managed to take back Damascus and the Holy Land only in 629. And in 634, the Western Red Sea Arab army moved north into the region. They encountered no resistance from the local population, which had been rendered apathetic and their economy destroyed by the interminable warfare. And so it happened that Khalid met serious resistance only outside of Damascus, and not from the population, but rather just from the garrison that Heraclius left behind. And they fought hard. They did their duty. They fought from August 20th to September 18th of 634. But without any support from the local population, their numbers were depleted until they were forced to surrender. The surviving soldiers were executed. The Byzantines were astonished when they learned how many of the population had converted to Islam so swiftly. But with the background we've covered, the reason should be, pretty clear. The Muslims not only retained their new conquest, but used them as basis for even more conquest. The regions they conquered remain Islamic to this day, in part because the military machines of both Persia and Byzantium had been ruined by their generations of warfare, and in part because neither field army could rely on anything warmer than indifference from the local population. So this victory gave Islam control over the Holy Land, what is now Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, which included the patriarchal cities of Antioch, where the term Christian was first used, as well as the city of Jerusalem. This territory was added to that absorbed by the other army, the Eastern Army, consisting of the territory that's now Jordan and Iraq. And there was another reason why the local population accepted the Muslims, and we'll get to that in a minute. In the same year, 634, on August 23rd, 1 month before the Muslims captured Damascus in Syria, the first Caliph Abu Bakr died. He died of an undetermined fever, just as Muhammad had. Abu Bakr did have sons, but there was no consideration of any of them to follow him as Caliph. Before he died, when he started feeling sick, but when he was still cogent, he met with the Sahaba. And the result was that, they already decided who the next Caliph was going to be. The second Caliph was a cousin of Khalid's, the general Khalid. That cousin's name was Umar ibn al-Khattab, or Caliph Umar. He was of the Quraysh tribe, but of a different clan. He was of the Banu Adai clan. Umar adhered to the expansionist interpretation of Islam. So once he heard that Damascus was conquered, he relocated the capital from Medina to Damascus, because that would facilitate communication with the Muslim armies of conquest. This occurred only 2 years and 3 months after the death of Muhammad. The rapid expansion of Islam into formerly Christian lands, and later into pagan lands, required a way of dealing with non-Muslims, who remained a numerical majority in those populations for at least the early years, say the first generation. The solution was a legal construct designated the Dhimma, which means protected person. The Dhimma were required, the Dhimmi, the plural, were required to pay an extra tax, and they had to practice their faith modestly, was the phrase. So like modest dress means that you're covered. So practicing the faith modestly means you do it behind closed doors. The first example of this construct was the Pact of Umar, offered to the population in Syria. The majority were Christian, of course, but it also contained a Jewish population. And the Pact of Umar served as the early template for this Dhimmi arrangement. Of course, as with any law, those entrusted with enforcement power can ignore it or manipulate it or abuse it in any way they wish. So it certainly did happen in subsequent history that some Islamic rulers ignored this and chose to impose the faith by force and kill those who refused. In fact, that's actually what triggered the First Crusade, as we'll cover later in the course. But the alternative approach of Umar still remained for others. So our source for this is, let's see, his name is actually Abu Bakr Muhammad, but al-Tartushi. So he was a writer, another medieval writer. So again, always trying to take it on their own terms. His book is called The Lamp of Kings, and it includes history of early Islam. So here is a quote. Now, this is, in his book, he's quoting, so he's medieval, but he's later. I mean, he wasn't alive at this time, so he's quoting someone who was from that time. Abd al-Rahman ibn Ghanam was his source. So, quote, "We heard from Abd al-Rahman ibn Ghanam as follows. When Caliph Umar, may God be pleased with him, accorded a peace to the Christians of Syria, we wrote to him as follows. In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate, this is a letter to the servant of God, Umar, commander of the faithful, from the Christians of," and this pact, so then you'd insert the name of your city. Homs or Antioch or Damascus. So they would each write this petition. When you came against us, we asked you for safe conduct for ourselves, our descendants, our property, and the people of our community. And we undertook the following obligations toward you. So these are the Christians saying that this is, will be good, sort of thing. So we shall not build in our cities or in the neighborhood new monasteries, churches, convents, nor shall we repair by day or by night such of them as are abandoned or are situated in the quarters of Muslims. We shall keep our gates wide open for passers-by and travelers. We shall give board and lodging to all Muslims who pass our way for 3 days. We shall not give shelter in our churches or in our dwellings to any spy, nor abide him, nor hide him from the Muslims. We shall not teach the Quran to our children. We shall not manifest our religion publicly, nor convert anyone to it. We shall not prevent any of our kin from entering Islam if they wish. We shall show respect toward the Muslims, and we shall rise from our seats when they wish to sit. We shall not seek to resemble the Muslims by imitating any of their garments, the kalansua, that's the knitted prayer cap, the turban, the footwear. We shall not speak as they do, nor shall we adopt their kunya. That's a turn of phrase in Arabic. It's more specifically Arabic, that an adult would be referred to as the father. Like if his grown son was famous, then that he would be referred to as Abu al-Walid, if it'd be the father of Walid. So Christians are saying we won't do that. We shall not mount on saddles, nor shall we gird swords, nor bear any kind of arms, nor carry them on our persons. We shall not engrave Arabic inscriptions on our seals. Excuse me. We shall not sell fermented drinks. We shall clip the fronts of our heads. We shall always dress in the same way wherever we may be, and we shall bind the zunar round our waists. The zunar was a distinctive belt, a brightly colored, striped belt, satin belt, to visually identify those who are Christians. We shall not display our crosses or our books in the roads or markets of the Muslims. Remember, practice the faith modestly, meaning you keep that behind closed doors. We shall use only clappers in our churches, very softly, clappers like a wooden hammer instead of bells. We shall not raise our voices when following our dead. We shall not show lights on any of the roads of the Muslims or in their markets. We shall not bury our dead near the Muslims. We shall not take slaves who have been allotted to Muslims. We shall not build houses taller than the houses of Muslims. Then the Caliph Umar added, they, meaning the Christians, shall not buy anyone made prisoner by the Muslims, and whoever strikes a Muslim with deliberate intent shall forfeit the protection of this pact. We accept these conditions for ourselves and for the people of our community, and in return, we receive safe conduct. If we in any way violate these undertakings, for which we ourselves stand surety, we forfeit our dima, and we become liable to the penalties for sedition. Okay, now aligning this with what we covered before, in the year 636, which is a year after this pact, in 636, Saint Isidore of Seville died. We had a whole session on him. Same year, 636, on August 20th, the Battle of the Yarmouk River, 65 miles south of Damascus. The Yarmouk River is an eastern tributary of the Jordan River. It enters the Jordan just south of the Sea of Galilee. The Emperor Heraclius had assembled the bulk of the entire Byzantine military machine and staked it all on a war of annihilation to wipe out the Muslims and retake Syria, Lebanon, and the Holy Land. The Muslims, riding camels, attacked during a sandstorm and wiped out the Greek army. And there was no other. After generations of war with Persia, there was no other. The Emperor Heraclius barely escaped with his life. So the Battle of the Yarmouk River, 636, was the end of land resistance to Islam by Heraclius. By the following year, 637, Islamic armies were setting up camp in the vicinity of Jerusalem, so that this obviously was going to be the next target. After the defeat at Yarmouk, the Byzantine military and political officials just left. They fled. But the bishop of Jerusalem, the Christian bishop, stayed. This was Bishop Sophronius. So, de facto, I mean, he was the senior ranking, Byzantine official, as well as being the senior Christian ecclesiastic. So when the Muslims sent their messengers, demanding surrender, the messengers, the guys at the gate, didn't know who to just, call the bishop. So the bishop heard him out, and he said that he would only surrender the city to the caliph personally. And because of the terms, he had heard of the Pact of Umar, that Christians would be allowed to practice their faith modestly, and but he wanted to see him personally because 23 years earlier, Sophronius wasn't there. He wasn't bishop in Jerusalem at the time, but everybody knew that 23 years earlier, when the Persians took Jerusalem, the Persians slaughtered 90,000 Christians in the Holy Land. So Sophronius, he wasn't going to open the gates of the city, until he heard and actually spoke to Umar, looked him in the eye, and see, that he was not going to do that. Umar agreed. I mean, going to Jerusalem was sacred for him too as a Muslim. So Bishop Sophronius gave him a tour of the city, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. When the time for prayer came, Umar prayed outside of the church, where later a mosque was built, the Mosque of Umar. Umar and Sophronius signed a treaty that functioned as the instrument of surrender of Jerusalem to Islam. It followed pretty closely, at least the idea of the Pact of Umar given in Syria. So the text of the treaty, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. This is the assurance of safety which the servant of God Umar, the commander of the faithful, has given to the people of Jerusalem. He has given them an assurance of safety for themselves, for their property, their churches, their crosses, the sick and healthy of the city, and for all the rituals which belong to their religion. Their churches will not be inhabited by Muslims and will not be destroyed. Neither they, nor the land on which they stand, nor their cross, nor their property will be damaged. They will not be forcibly converted. No Jew will live with them in Jerusalem. The people of Jerusalem must pay the taxes like the people of other cities, and must expel the Byzantines and the robbers. Those are the people of Jerusalem who want to leave with the Byzantines, take their property, and abandon their churches and crosses will be safe until they reach their place of refuge. The villagers may remain in the city if they wish, but they must pay taxes, like the Christians. Those who wish may go with the Byzantines, and those who wish may return to their families. Nothing is to be taken from them before their harvest is reaped, if they pay their taxes according to their obligations. Then the conditions laid out in this letter are under the covenant of God and the responsibility of his prophet, of the caliphs, and of the faithful. So Jerusalem became Muslim then, and it remained that way until the First Crusade. And it was actually violation of this is what triggered the First Crusade. And that was, let's see, it's over 4 centuries later. Following year, 638, Caliph Umar commanded that Islam spread into Persia, present-day Iran. The main obstacle was the Zagros Mountains. Okay, I wanted to get the maps. So here is the invasion of Persia. So present-day, see Iran. Now, I want you to see it's where it fits in relation to everything: Russia, Caspian Sea, and all this. So you see the larger picture. Now I have a better map of the Persia itself. So the Persia and all the countries with the suffix "stan." That means place of. So like Afghanistan is the place of the Afghans, and that is a Farsi term. So it's part of Persia. So you see here's Iran and all the stands over here. So the plan, the Islamic invasion, was another two-pronged assault. So here's Iraq over here. So they would the southern would go from Basra. So the Zagros Mountains are a major obstacle. So they're limited by the passes. So they go from Basra and go curl up here into Khuzestan in Iran, and then further up here they come. You might be able to make it out and come down in Tabriz. So there was a pass, a mountain pass that they followed. They followed a river, a Snowmelt River, go down, and that brought them into the plains. So they were able to get into to Tabriz, and that became the 2 bases. And from those bases, they conquered the rest. But the Persians put up a fight. They didn't just give up easily. So it went on for so the initial invasion was 638. And the fighting took 13 years. 13 years for the Muslims to conquer all that, Iran and Afghanistan and over to the east. But by the end, Iran and Afghanistan had a Muslim and Islamic ruling class. They adopted the same strategy as with the other conquest. Enemy soldiers, enemy combatants were killed. The rest of the population was allowed to retain their religion, but it had to be practiced in private, and they had to pay the extra tax. So they sacrificed the rights of citizenship, also. They succeeded in gradually wearing away all but the most committed to their faith, so that now those populations are virtually entirely Islamic. While this was going on, so 638 for the next 13 years, there's actually 2 Islamic armies fighting in Persia. The next year, 639, on the other side, on the western side, the Islam invades Egypt. Okay, so here we Saudi Arabia and the Red Sea. We've already seen that on another map, and so they want to go over to Egypt. So they Mecca and Medina here, we've already covered those. So the Red Sea route, they go up to the Mediterranean, and then they already have the Holy Land. They took the Holy Land. So then they followed the Gaza Strip, essentially, follow the Mediterranean coast and take them into Egypt. But that strip there, that's the Sinai Peninsula. So once again, they did the 2-pronged assault. Once one stayed along the coast to go toward Damietta and then Alexandria, along the coast. Then another group, because they have camels, remember they can do this, they went down through the southern tip of Sinai and attacked this way. And they went for, you see where Cairo is. Cairo didn't exist yet. I'm going to explain where that came from. But they were aiming for that area. So the significance of that being that the Nile, it doesn't show on that map, but the Nile River Delta is shaped like a V. And at the bottom of that V, so they were taking the two important ports on the Mediterranean, Damietta, Alexandria, and they were taking the base of the delta. So they essentially controlled, at least the trade access, the trade importance of the Nile with the Mediterranean world. And that two-pronged strategy, I mean, it worked for them. That's why they kept doing it. At the base of the triangle, what the Egyptians called it Heliopolis at that point, it fell in July of 640, and Alexandria, in the north, the port on the northern delta on the Mediterranean, fell in September of 642. And that was the last of the eastern patriarchal cities from Christian antiquity to be taken by Islam. So they took Antioch in Syria, Jerusalem in the Holy Land, and now Alexandria in Egypt. Only Rome and Constantinople remained of the ancient patriarchal cities, remained in Christian hands. During the Egyptian fighting, the Emperor Heraclius died in 641. In the same year, 641, the Caliph Umar ordered the establishment of a purely Islamic city in the newly conquered Egypt as an assertion of permanence. It was on the Nile, south of the bottom of the triangular delta. So this map looks a little better. So you see Egypt here, and you see the Nile Delta. So you see Giza, that was the ancient Egypt. That's where the pyramids are, the giant pyramids of Giza. The pyramid of Khufu is the largest in the world ever built. And then you see Cairo. So Cairo was the new city, the Islamic city. Initially it was called Al-Fustat, but then, the name was changed to Cairo. And of course it's still there. So the Caliph Umar ordered that city be constructed. The word Cairo comes from the Arabic term Al-Kahira, which means the vanquisher. The general who conquered Egypt for Islam was named Amir ibn Alas. He celebrated by constructing the first mosque on the continent of Africa, and it was in Cairo. At the time, it was a simple rectangle, and there's still a mosque there, but later, expanded and all, but it's still called the Mosque of Amir. In 643, the Romans they continued going west along North Africa, conquered the ancient Roman province of Cyrenaica, that's present-day Libya. That was the next step westward in fulfilling the orders of the Caliph Umar to expand, just continue expanding Islam. Same year, 643, the Muslims had a mosque constructed in Jerusalem on the site of the Temple Mount. It is called the Dome of the Rock because it is built over the rock floor that Muslims believe Muhammad and his horse Barak landed on 70 years earlier in 621 as part of the Isra and the Miraj, when they believe Muhammad ascended to heaven. We read about that in 2 sessions ago. Much of the surviving local population converted to Islam, so that it was actually it was a Greek, but it was a Muslim convert Greek architect who built that initial mosque. Because of the story of Muhammad leaving Earth and going to heaven, I'll skip that, because if I get diverted on architecture, we have so little time. So the next year, 644, November 3rd, a Persian named Peruz assassinated the Caliph Umar in retribution for, the invasion of his country. Peruz was evidently a person of unusual determination as well as skill. He killed the Caliph, and he killed 9 others who were guarding the Caliph while trying to escape. But he took too many wounds. He realized he wouldn't get away, so rather than be captured, he stabbed himself in the throat. But he did succeed in killing the Caliph. Islam at that point stretched from Libya in the west to Afghanistan in the east. The Sahaba met. They were down to 6 in number. And those are those who converted to Islam and fought with Muhammad as adults. There were only 6 left. They elected one of their own as the 3rd Caliph, the Caliph Uthman ibn Affan. He was also of the Quraysh tribe, but of yet another clan, the Banu Umayyah clan. This clan was from Mecca and had been among those who were originally in opposition to Muhammad and had participated in some of the harassment and persecution of Muhammad and his followers. So this choice of a caliph from the Banu Umayyah inflamed those Muslims who were from Medina. They were already feeling slighted. Medina was already not happy since the Caliph Umar had relocated the capital of the empire from Medina, away from Medina, to Damascus. 645, the Caliph Uthman orders copies of the Quran to be circulated. And the normative text, of course, would remain Arabic. It still is. 649, Islam conquered the island of Cyprus. 651, the last of the Sassanid rulers of Persia died. His army, he'd been defeated in battle. His armies were destroyed. He was actually on the run in disguise. He was killed by common bandits. They probably didn't even know who he was. But 651 is considered the end of the last non-Islamic dynasty to rule Persia. Persia is now Iran, and it's still an Islamic country. In 651, same year, the Caliph Uthman coins the first Muslim money. The Muslims were not really comfortable with the coinage of some of these other lands, because some of them have represented the face or profile of the ruler, and they don't like representing the human form. So the Muslim money just had a Arabic script engraved on it. In 655, and continuing on the west, attacking the Greeks, the Byzantines, the Muslims engage and destroy the Byzantine fleet, or at least one of them, at Lycia. That's off the southern coast of present-day Turkey. In the year 656, on June 17th, the Caliph Uthman was assassinated, this time by fellow Muslims. The previous one was assassinated by a Persian, who of course had a grudge because his country was invaded. But this Uthman was assassinated by fellow Muslims. Okay, why did this happen? Uthman had divided the Muslim conquest, which by this point were extensive, into 12 provinces. He installed his relatives of the Banu Umayyah as governors of all 12. Now, human nature being what it is, some of them did well, others were shamelessly corrupt. And Uthman would do nothing to discipline those who were corrupt. This was the nucleus of revolts by other Arabs against him in Egypt, in Basra, and Kufa. Basra and Kufa in Iraq. It was at Kufa in southern Iraq that Ali, remember him, I told you we'd meet him again, Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad, had lived since being denied the caliphate 24 years earlier, when Muhammad died in 632. The rebels, the anti-Umayyad rebels, were well informed. They knew when Caliph Uthman left Damascus to return to Mecca for the summer of 656. They dispatched three hit teams, three different hit teams, which succeeded in murdering Uthman on June 17th, 656. The next day, June 18th, the rebels acknowledged Ali as Caliph, as the commander of the faithful, the successor. These followers call themselves Shiites, followers of Ali. Their view is not only for Ali personally, as we've already covered, but also, and in this period, they believe that only a member of Muhammad's clan, the Banu Hashim, could be a legitimate successor as Caliph. And to connect this with modern history, as far as I know, the only ruling family in the Islamic world today that qualifies is the ruling family of Jordan. They're Hashemites. They're descended from the Banu Hashim. Naturally, the Umayyads did not accept Ali as Caliph, and one of them, named Muawiyah, was serving as governor of Damascus in Syria at the time that the Caliph Uthman, his relative, was assassinated. Muawiyah turned many against Ali by declaring that either Ali had participated in the murder of the Caliph, or he at least approved of it because, post facto, because he had not punished those responsible. Muawiyah and those he weaned to his way of thinking asserted that they were following the example of Muhammad's teaching. So they had more right to the loyalty of the faithful than had Ali. So this group, who used that argument, came to be, they're the Sunni Muslims. And the word Sunni is derived from the word sunnah, which means example. So they believe that any person following the example of Muhammad can legitimately be chosen as the Caliph, as commander of the faithful, whether or not that person is actually related to Muhammad or not. So this conflict, Sunni-Shia, first Sunni-Shia conflict, resulted in a 5-year-long civil war within Islam called the First Fitna, F-I-T-N-A, or time of trial. At the end of the conflict, Ali was assassinated on February 28th, 661. His oldest son, Hassan, took over Ali's followers, and he's considered Caliph by them, not by the Sunnis. But in practice, Hassan only ruled southern Iraq, Kufa and Basra. Muawiyah, on the other hand, consolidated control of the rest of the empire and retained his capital in Damascus. And so he's considered the Caliph by the Sunnis. Even though Uthman and Muawiyah were both Umayyads, they were both from the Banu Umayyah clan, nevertheless, Muawiyah is considered the founder of the dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty. That's U-M-A-Y-Y-A-D, Umayyad, because he began the practice of passing the caliphate down the male line from father to son, rather than election by a group of elders. The Umayyads would rule the Islamic Empire from 750 AD and excuse me, until 750. And then other Umayyads would continue in a successor kingdom. So when that empire, the Islamic empire, fell apart, just like the Roman Empire did, and successor kingdoms were created. And one of the successor kingdoms was Islamic Spain. And so Umayyads continued to control that from 750 until after the year 1000. Hassan, Ali's eldest son, was murdered by poison on March 6th, 669. The Shiite schism was continued. The leadership of the Shiites was taken over by his younger brother, named Hussein. Hussein was assassinated. Well, not as he was killed. He was killed in battle. So I guess that's a distinction. It was not assassinated. It wasn't a poisoned in the night. He was killed in battle. The Battle of Karbala. That is in Iraq, 62 miles southwest of Baghdad. He died in battle on October 10th, 680. The death of Hussein is still commemorated annually by Shiite Muslims on the day of Ashura. That's the 10th day of the month of Muharram. And sometimes the news at the time will show that that's when they beat themselves with chains, and that's to punish themselves for their ancestors having failed to protect Ali and his sons. Hatred and violence between Sunni and Shia continues to this day, 1,300 years later. The Umayyads, who control most of the Islamic Empire at this point outside of Iraq, promoted a style of architecture that was a blending of Greek columns with Persian onion domes and Egyptian-style wall decorations using the written language. Although the Muslims used Arabic script, of course, instead of hieroglyphics. The Umayyads also added minarets outside of their mosques. A minaret is from an Arabic word, manara, meaning a lighthouse, but, spiritually a lighthouse, as the place from which the call to prayer would be made. Also, the Umayyads, they created a different flag, of a crescent moon with a star. Islam follows the lunar calendar, as did the ancient Jews. So in Muslim usage, the crescent is intended to recall the beginning of the lunar month as a reminder of the beginning of Islam, which took place in the Hijra, the nighttime escape of Muhammad and Abu Bakr from Mecca to Medina. And so the star represents Medina. That's their objective. And the place to which they directed themselves, the place of refuge that became the Prophet's city. And as we've seen from there, Islam really changed. It became successful. 674. For the first time, Islam lays siege to the city of Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. So they destroyed a fleet off of Lycia, and then they went up the coast, the western coast of present-day Turkey, the eastern side of the Aegean Sea, and they took port after port. And then Muawiyah, the Sunni Caliph, decided it was time to take Constantinople. A naval blockade and an attack commenced in April of 674. And the attacks went on for 4 years. The Emperor, Constantine IV, had prepared the city well. It was provisioned. It was protected by walls that could not be breached by the technology of the day. In fact, they would not be breached in history until gunpowder, until, cannons. Even with that, a successful blockade could have forced a capitulation, but they were never able to completely cut off the city because of an advantage in military technology invented just 2 years before the siege. It was a Greek, an architect by profession, from Heliopolis in Egypt. He managed to escape Egypt when Islam conquered it. He was Christian. He lost everything when the Muslims took Egypt. His family, his home, his career. He fled to Constantinople. He set his mind on revenge. And it so happened that this guy was a genius. And so when he set his mind to revenge, history changed. He combined, his name was Callinicos. He combined pulverized sulfur with salt, with resin, naturally occurring resin. It's a naturally occurring hydrocarbon. It's a plant secretion. With naturally occurring petroleum, bitumen. It's like a viscous tar. Dumped it all in a vat, then dumped in wood chips and sawdust into the mix, and let it congeal into a flammable jelly that was called after the Greek word naphthar, which means a purifying fire. So after that, it was called naphtha. Essentially, it was ancient napalm. He persuaded, after he did a proof of concept, the Byzantine emperor funded this. They affixed a mechanism on the front of the Byzantine warships. It was a long bronze tube with bellows at one end, and the enclosed vat, so they would essentially blow, the jelly, the flammable jelly, through this tube. And after it exited, like once it got back in the air, naphtha burned even on water. So it's actually the jelly on the water that's burning, but for somebody who'd never seen it before, it looks like it's just the water burning, and that freaks people out. And when it hit an enemy ship, it would the pitch that held the planks together would melt faster than the wood would burn. So the ships would just literally go to pieces. So Latins, when they beheld this in battle, they didn't know the chemistry. Of course, the Greeks weren't going to tell them. So the Latins called it simply the ignis Graecus, the Greek fire. Greek fire prevented the Muslim fleet from simply anchoring off the coast and starving them out. Yet the severely depleted military of Byzantium prevented the Emperor Constantine from totally destroying the Muslims. So it was kind of a stalemate. Meanwhile, in the east, in the year 674, an Islamic army reached the Indus River for the first time in India. 678, after 4 years of siege, the Byzantine Emperor Constantine negotiated a truce with the Sunni Caliph Muawiyah that required Constantine to essentially pay protection money to the Muslims. Each year he had to send to Damascus 50 slaves, 50 horses, and 3,000 pounds of gold bars. The siege, followed by the humiliating truce, confronted the Emperor Constantine IV with the reality that the possibility of recapturing Egypt from the Muslims, as well as the rest of the East, was non-existent for the foreseeable future. 694, Islam overran Armenia. Remember, that's to the area to the north in Caucasia. 697, in Africa, the Muslims capture Carthage, indicating Islam was continuing to move west across North Africa. The year 700, the Muslims completed the conquest of what is now Algeria and Tunisia in North Africa. So all that area had been Roman. North Africa had been Roman and therefore Christian. Yet over time, it was bred out. So, it was largely exterminated. Christianity was largely exterminated in North Africa. By 702, North Africa all the way to Morocco had been completely absorbed by Islam. The next target was Spain across the strait. In the year 705, fast forwarding, the sixth Umayyad Caliph, who's the 10th Sunni Caliph, his name was Walid the First. In the year 705, he became Caliph, and he's noted for he made Arabic the official language of the empire, meaning all government documents, all judicial proceedings, all correspondence with the government, all official archival records in Arabic. In the year 706, he ordered that the Church of St. John the Baptist in Damascus, which the Muslims had taken over as a mosque in 634. In 706, Walid ordered that it be torn down and replaced with a new mosque. The result is still called the Umayyad Mosque, and it is considered the fourth holiest place in Islam. So as Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, and Damascus, and this mosque, the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. Curiously, since Muslims recognized John the Baptist as one of the prophets prior to Muhammad, they included a shrine to John the Baptist in the mosque, and it's still there. In the year 709, events occurred in Spain, which are going to lead to a change. Recall last time we visited Spain, it was a successor kingdom carved out of the old Roman Empire, and this one by the Visigoths, the same Visigoths who sacked the city of Rome in 410. They created a kingdom in Spain that lasted for 300 years. I mean, that's... So, all right, so to catch up, so Islam had gone, so here's Egypt and Libya, so they went all the way across North Africa, conquering it. So you see here right at the top is southern Spain. So it's just separated. This is the one end of the Mediterranean opening to the Atlantic. So across from Morocco is Spain, and then this is the Strait of Gibraltar. It's not that far across. So across it, and here on this we see, here's Morocco, and here's the rest with Spain here. So keep this in mind. Islam is going to attack Spain from the south. But remember, nothing just happens. There are reasons for all of this. There's always a reason. Even if it's a stupid reason, there's always a reason. Whether this reason is stupid or not, I'll leave that to you to judge. So in the year 709, the Visigoth king of Spain was named Metairie. He arrested two powerful Visigoth chieftains whom he regarded as threats. One was the Duke of Cantabria. The other was the Duke of Cordova. He had them both blinded, thrown in a dungeon, and just not fed or given water. So I guess they died of dehydration before starvation. But these two guys, they each had a son. The Duke of Cantabria's son was named Pelayo. The Duke of Cordova's son was named Roderick. So keep those in mind. We're going to meet both of these guys. Roderick, immediately. So Roderick, the son of the mutilated and murdered Duke of Cordova, assassinated the Visigoth king Metairie the next year, 710, for revenge, obviously, for killing his father. Roderick made himself king of the Visigoths, and it turned out he would be the last Visigoth king of Spain. Witiza, whom Roderick just murdered, also had sons. So two of Witiza's sons escaped the purge, and they crossed the Strait of Gibraltar into Morocco, and they took refuge in Tangier, which had been in the hands of Muslims for the previous 10 years. They joined with the last Byzantine governor of North Africa, Julian. Of course, Byzantine North Africa was gone. The Muslims conquered it. But he couldn't get back home. He was afraid he would get captured and, enslaved. So he was hiding in Kuwait. He was afraid to return home. The Muslim governor of Africa, newly Muslim Africa, was a guy named Musa, M-U-S-A. Musa was born a Christian. He was orphaned, raised in a Syrian monastery when the Islamic conquest absorbed Christian Syria. Because he could read and write, Musa converted to Islam, and he rose quickly through the ranks. He became a protege of the guy who became the governor of Egypt, Abdul Aziz. Abdul Aziz was the brother of one of the caliphs, a Sunni caliph. That's how Musa secured the appointment in northwest Africa, Morocco, that put him in a position to deal with the Byzantine Count Julian and the two sons of Witiza. These three guys convinced Musa that Spain was vulnerable, divided into three factions after the assassination of Witiza. They offered to serve as guides and interpreters for the Muslims if the Muslims invaded Spain. In exchange, they wanted land and position in Spain after what they assumed would be a Muslim victory. Musa agreed to the plan, and he ordered his best general, another former Christian who converted to Islam. This guy was ethnically Berber, so that's the indigenous people in North Africa. His name was Tariq, the General Tariq. In October of 710, well, no, let's get that. We'll just stick with this. So the next year, it took a while to get the troops together. The next year, April 29th, 711, the Muslim general Tariq crossed the Strait of Gibraltar from Morocco, landed in Spain with 7,000 troops. The contenders for the Visigoth throne decided to join forces under the command of Roderick, who did have the strongest claim. They engaged the Muslims at the Guadalete River on July 19th, 711. Roderick's on the battlefield while facing the enemy invasion. Roderick's previous foes, who had said, okay, we'll be your allies for this battle, they decided on the battlefield that would be the opportune time to dispose of Roderick. So in a spectacle that even the Muslims didn't believe, they thought it was some kind of trick, that Roderick's rivals, claimants, turned on him during the battle and attacked him. So Tariq and his Muslims just sat back and watched this until the Visigoths had finished killing each other. And then Tariq and the Muslims swept in to kill any survivors. Roderick, of course, was killed in battle. Evidently, those who turned on Roderick during the battle thought that the Muslims were just doing a raid. They take some loot and go back home. And they were wrong. After witnessing this incident, Tariq had nothing but contempt for the Visigoths. He sent 700 men to take Cordova, which fell to them immediately. It didn't even put up a resistance, while he marched on Toledo, the capital of Visigoth Spain. Not only did Toledo surrender without opposition, but Merida, potentially impregnable before the invention of modern artillery, was abandoned at the mere sight of the advance of the Islamic army. So the Muslims occupied Spain. It had followed the established pattern. Those who fought them openly were killed. Those who surrendered were allowed to convert to Islam or to remain Christian, but practice their faith modestly, pay an extra tax. One Visigoth who fought with Roderick and did not desert him was Pelayo, who was the son of the other duke that was blinded and killed by King Vitiza. Roderick was killed in the battle. Pelayo survived, but he was captured and he refused to convert, so he was enslaved. His sister suffered the same fate of being a slave. The following year, 712, Musa, the Muslim governor in North Africa, and the General Tariq's superior commanding officer, arrived in Spain himself with reinforcements, 18,000 troops, to begin the colonization. He took Seville easily. The gates of Seville were opened by a Christian trader inside of the city. The following year, Granada, Cartagena, the Mediterranean side of Spain were taken. They then marched to central and across the peninsula to central and southern Portugal, leaving only northern Spain still in Christian hands. Meanwhile, on the other side, in the east, on the other side of the expansion, Muslims occupied Samarkand, which is in present-day Uzbekistan. That's on the Silk Road, so that Samarkand is halfway between the eastern shore of the Caspian Sea and the western border of China. And as Samarkand became a completely Muslim city, it still is. I thought I'd paused. Sorry. I was looking for a better map. Anyway, I couldn't find it. In the year 732, the Muslim Emir Abd al-Rahman, leading 50,000 troops, sacked Bordeaux, destroyed the shrine of St. Hilary of Poitiers. Just 50 miles north was Tours, the heart of the Loire Valley. When the Islamic invasion began, the mayor of the palace in Paris, who was like the chief of staff, was the guy named Charles Martel, or Carl. Martel is his nickname, the Hammer. So that, he assembled an army of 30,000 Frankish and Burgundian troops and marched them down to face the Muslims. The engagement, if you want to look it up, look at the Battle of Tours in 732. The date will probably be October 25th, but it was actually an 8-day period of fighting, multiple engagements between Tours and Poitiers. And at the end of which, the Franks, Charles Martel and the French, stopped the Islamic advance. It was a decisive victory for the French, for the Christians, and a decisive defeat for the Muslims. So now the Muslims would retain a presence in southern France, the other places they had conquered, until the year 759. So Charles Martel and then others the Duke of Aquitaine and others, they attacked, and drove the Muslims out by force. But by 759, then the Muslims would be removed from Spain. But 732 is decisive because that was the first real stop. Not that it was the first stop. It was the first military halt of the Islamic advance in the West. So they had previously been stopped in the east at Constantinople, but that was it. So the Battle of Tours in 732 is decisive. In the year 747, Abu al-Abbas as-Safa raised a Shiite revolt against the Sunni Umayyad Caliph, marching under a black flag to distinguish his followers from the Umayyad flag, which was white. As-Safa was a descendant of Muhammad's youngest uncle, therefore of the same clan. In other words, he was a Banu Hashem. For 3 years, the two sides slaughtered each other, Sunni and Shiite, until the Shiites achieved a decisive victory, capturing the city of Damascus in 750. Abbas al-Safa was then recognized as Caliph and the founder of a new dynasty named after him, the Abbasid. He relocated the capital from Damascus to Baghdad in Iraq, and it remained the capital until Baghdad was sacked by the Mongols in 1258. The Sunni Umayyads, though they lost the ascendancy in the empire, had not completely given up. The Muslim emir, Abd al-Rahman, escaped the sack of Damascus and moved to Spain with some troops and followers and took over. So the Sunni Umayyads took over Spain and formed their own Muslim kingdom there, separate, so it's essentially seceding from the rest of the Muslim empire, which now is controlled by Shiites. And they renamed it Spain. They started calling it Al-Andalus. And that was to the Western and medieval writing. They referred to Andalusia as Spain, Islamic Spain. And there the Sunni Umayyads maintained an independent government until 1031. And then as Muslims would stay, for 300 years after that until 1492. But the Sunni Umayyads, from this point, from 747 until 1031. Islam was never again politically united under a single power. It's still to this day. In the year 749, St. John Damascene, who was the last Eastern father of the church, died. And it's with him we'll pick up next time, because he was a Christian born in born in Syria to a Christian family. But he grew up when Syria was under Muslim control. And he would make essential contributions to the faith that would finally be codified at the Second Council of Nicaea in 787. So we'll cover John Damascene, iconoclasm, which was the problem that precipitated the council and much of his writings, and then we'll cover the council. So that'll be the next unit. But for now, this ends our multi-session unit on Islam. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your attention. This session is adjourned.